everybody, and welcome back to another week of The Grid. I am Pete Collins, and I've got my great friends here, Mia McCormick, full of vim, vigor, and vitality. How you doing, Mia?
Very vigorous today.
Yes, we're gonna get into some arguments today, aren't we?
I'm ready.
We're gonna battle it out. We're gonna duke it out.
Got boxing gloves under the desk.
And Brad Moore, the beard to be feared, right there,
Don't
baby.
touch me.
Look
Don't
at
touch
that.
me. I will punch
You're
you.
so touchable, though. Yep, we're going to have a great discussion, and this is really going to be kind of we're hoping y'all are going to chime in. We're going to have some great discussions about photojournalism and the whole role of manipulation. There's been some stuff, it comes around almost every year when World Press Photo has their contest for Photo of the Year, and then there's always questions about what photos should be accepted versus what photos get disqualified. And over 22% of the photos that made it into the final round got disqualified when they compared them to the raw photos. And so we're going to have some discussions about that, about where the line should be and how all that plays out, especially since we kind of live in the industry of teaching people how to manipulate
your
photos.
photos.
Thought it might be an interesting discussion. So what do you think, guys? How you doing? Brad, how are you?
I'm good.
I think Brad is especially close to this subject because you do concert photography and you do it for yourself as a professional, but then you also submit images for news organizations.
Right. Yeah, so from where I stand, if I'm shooting for myself and I know the photos are going on my website and nowhere else, I don't mind cloning out an exit sign or a monitor that's detracting from the picture or whatever. To me, it's art. It's not necessarily journalism, because music is an art, photography is an art, and even the production of the show is an art in and of itself. And art is subject to different thoughts or whatever. I don't know. But, I'll manipulate color. I'll clone stuff out. It doesn't bother me a bit, because for me, I'm not reporting on the show. It's just, here's a pretty picture. But if I turn around and submit to the wire service, knowing that it could be picked up by any publication out there, then all that stuff stays in. I don't do as much editing to those pictures that I send in to them.
Why?
Because then I'm reporting on something. Then I'm reporting on an event and not just making a pretty picture.
So I think this is where the debate is here and why so many photos were disqualified this year as opposed to last year. 20% was 3 times the number of photographers that were disqualified from last year. And to be fair, over 97,000 images were entered, 5,600 different photographers, and 20% disqualified basically for post-processing, so manipulation of the image. Over-manipulation, right, because it's allowed to a degree. And the question is, where is that line? How fine is that line? And I think that there's different perspectives from a journalist and from the general public, the general consumer of this knowledge. And that is what is up for debate tonight, whether or not how much toning is too much toning. When you're losing data from an image, is that too much? And those are the guidelines, that the World Press goes by, that if you're losing data from an image, that is too much. If something that is when they submit a raw photo and then they submit the processed photo. So the difference is whether or not, I got it, I'm looking at this camera now. This is my camera. Mia, look at the right camera. The one with the red lights.
The one with Arnaldo back there going,
over here. Well, he's kind of short and the camera's kind of tall.
He's kind of short.
Back to the subject at hand.
Sorry.
Oh, see, now wait. Where are we? Here we are.
All right.
Okay, so the idea that what is acceptable to the general consumer versus what is acceptable to the World Press Photo Organization, I think, are 2 very different standards.
Well, and it brings up an interesting debate that people are saying, what line should there be, and is where we've come with photojournalism, with the proliferation of the internet, iPhones, all this stuff. There's less editing going on, as far as editors used to be the one that says yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Now we think of editing as manipulating. We just make the image better and then we send it on. The big question comes into play is, where is that line? How should we divide that line? And is it a line that should be moved farther one way or the other?
Well, and who sets the guidelines of that line? That's a big thing, too. We have these right, it should be.
It comes down to each publication.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So then you say, well, if the World, Press Organization is what's in charge of these awards and they set the guidelines for it, then you should know that when you enter it. And here's the thing: in this case, most of the photographers who entered thought they were following the rules. So that is where the problem is where is that blend? What is too much?
Well, because you could even get down into semantics. One of the things, you can go look at the rules. We don't have any of the images that were disqualified for this one. I've got one that I'm going to show you in a minute that was disqualified from a previous year. But what they say that you can do, you can't clone and heal or whatever, but you can adjust the toning. And you can do a lot adjusting the toning. There's a whole gamut of how much toning you could do. You could darken something up so it disappears, or lighten something up so it disappears. And so some people are saying, well, that's too vague. That's not fair, because you're going to say yes to this and no to that. Where is the line to decide this stuff?
And you can create moods with it, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
what comes to mind is the OJ cover of Time, right? Where
Yeah, I got that one.
One image. So Pete's going to pull it up so you guys can take a look at it there.
All right.
So if you look at what the raw image looks like versus what ran on the magazine, the tone that's set, what it makes you feel, the emotion behind it.
Right, and this caused big issues for Time, because they put out the cover on the left, and then Newsweek put out the cover on the right, which did not have the toning that the Time one did. And the Time magazine definitely kind of gives you a sense of bias, or it definitely has a leaning
menacing.
and an emotion to it that kind of guides you in that direction. And so that's what people were very upset about. And so just simply toning can really change the attitude or atmosphere of the image.
Because the content of the picture hasn't changed.
Nope.
It's just darker.
Well, and you could even get into, I was reading one article, I did a lot of reading the last couple of days, the debate goes back and forth about all this. You could actually, if you want to get very pedantic about it, you could get in and just change pixel by pixel the tone, and in essence repaint and recreate the image by eliminating certain things. We talked about the whole, this image right here. This was back the Kent State shooting way back when, and you'll notice on the left she has the fence post coming out of her head, and in the retouched version it's gone. And the whole thing was talking about, this is a black and white photo, and all the stuff that was done, this was pre-computers, was done by changing the tone of the image. And so there's even the slippery slope of what manipulation can go on in an image. And, go ahead.
So we have a couple of photojournalists weighing in, actually, in the comments, and I want to just talk. Mitch shoots on the east coast of Florida. He's very active on our KelbyOne pages and whatnot, and he says that he only uses cropping and brightness controls as long as it doesn't delve away from what other people at the event saw with their own eyes.
Right.
And so this is where you draw that line of photojournalism, because we can say journalism as a whole has really stretched as what's real, what's reality, what the truth is, right? But if you see it, if you take an image of something, that should be the baseline of truth, right? Or so we think. The baseline of truth of what you see, what the camera sees, and the separation of an artist and somebody documenting an event.
Well, but then we get into the slippery slope of, well, what if I choose to use a wide-angle lens versus a zoom? What if I choose to use a flash? What if I choose to shoot from up high or down low? What if I choose to crop out an important part of the image? I take a picture that's of this whole scene, and then I crop down in this one little area, and I take that out of context of everything else. Even a photograph is not really neutral. And that's what a lot of people are claiming. It says as soon as you're taking a picture, you're manipulating reality. And so, there's a whole debate going on about that.
So looking at the blog that came out, so this was something that we saw in the New York Times and their blog, the Lens blog that they have, and they had a bunch of different photojournalists weighed in on this. And one of the things that I loved, they had Maggie Stieber on there, who's a Trailblazer interview of mine. Her interview is up if you want to take a look at it, and she was great. She was just so awesome. She has such a knowledge about how to work in situations where you are just there to photograph an event, right? And she goes into the whole, if your intention as a journalist is to go in and cover a situation, right? Not to manipulate it, to show it in the most real light possible. So what does that mean? And again, that separation of when you do it for your personal projects, that's where you're the artist. But there's a lot of pressure on people, photojournalists especially, if you want to win an award. There's a lot of pressure to develop something that hasn't been seen before, something out there that really, yes, you want to convey what happened, but you want to do it in a way that's compelling.
Well, and I think that's going to be a great thing to talk about is how the industry has changed, even how people got their kudos and how they're paid and stuff like that. Contests and competitions, getting your name out there is very much part of the industry nowadays. So there's an added pressure to do well and to come up with something nobody else has seen. Let's talk about it a little bit more after let's take a quick break, get people start thinking about this stuff. But before we leave, we want to do a quick shout out and say hey to the KelbyOne blog post social media winner for the week. And it is going to be the winner is...
book.
Yeah. The winner, who's the winner, Mia?
Lynn
Wysicki. we're just... And there we go. It's Lynn. Hey, Lynn. And you're going to get the Lightroom CC book for digital photographers in the special KelbyOne edition with the spiral-bound spine. Look at that. Ooh, right there. Yep. Okay. So congratulations, Lynn. Great shot with the flowers. Well done. And we're going to take a quick break. So be thinking about the different questions you may have. Think about digital manipulation, and make sure you join us. And part of the chat, you can go to KelbyOne.com. Check out the grid.
KelbyTV.com.
KelbyTV.com. Thank you, Brad, for kicking me under the table. And join in with us. We'll be right back after this break.
There's a really big Lightroom conference coming to Las Vegas, and if you're into Lightroom, you've got to be there. During this 3-day training event, you'll have unlimited access to the world's top instructors in Lightroom. You'll learn from trainers like Scott Kelby, the world's #1 best-selling book author on Lightroom, plus Adobe's expert team of instructors like Terry White, Julianne Cost, Brian Hughes, as well as other top instructors in Lightroom training. They'll teach you step-by-step how to take control of your digital photography workflow. If you want to take your Lightroom skills to the next level, you've got to be there.
Hey guys, my name is Peter Hurley, and I just did a new class on KelbyOne.com called The Art of the Edit. What is editing about? Do you shoot people? Let's say we do some amazing headshots and we do an amazing session. What do we have to do? We have to narrow that sucker down to the best shots. How do you pick the best headshot from all these pictures? Why am I picking this shot over this shot, or that shot over that shot, or that shot over that? Which one is she going to use? How are we going to know? This is my editing process. I'm going to pull out the shots that are the real winners out of there. I am looking for that elusive shebang shot. A shebang has lookability. It has something that makes me feel something inside. We're going to develop an eye for this. I'm going to show you how it's done. I'm going to show you how I do it. You have to find your own shebangs. Develop this muscle. The Art of the Edit, exclusively on KelbyOne.com. Shebang!
All right, we're back. What's so funny is, even during the break, we're kind of going back and forth. There's just so much in here to talk about, because it really gets down to, first of all, there's the techniques, there's the process, but then there's what it really boils down to, the integrity on the whole issue of where does that line divide, and it's so blurry.
Well, and I think that there's two sides of it. There's what happens when you take the photo, any kind of staging or anything that you do when you take the photo, and then there's the processing that happens afterwards. So, you know, for WPP, a lot of it was the post-processing was the problem. But there's also a huge issue with staging and how much of that you can do and how much you can't. And you know, true photojournalists to heart will say you don't stage anything ever. You don't ever ask anybody to do something again that they just did ever. But you go ahead, chime in.
Okay, so yeah,
let Pete counter this.
Yeah, but what's so funny is in a 1956 interview, Eugene Smith was asked about the whole idea of staging.
If you don't know who Eugene Smith is, he's like a really well-known Life magazine photographer. So continue.
And it says, the question was, I remember your picture of a Spanish woman throwing water into the street. Was that staged? And he answered, I would have not hesitated to ask her to throw the water. I don't object to staging if and only if I feel that it is an intensification of something that is absolutely authentic to the place. And the interviewer says, Cartier-Bresson never asked for this. Why do you break this basic rule of candid photography? And he goes, I didn't write the rules. Why should I follow them? Since I put a great deal of time and research to know what I'm about, I ask and arrange if I feel it's legitimate. The honesty lies in the photographer's ability to understand. Well, so here you go.
We're having to trust him.
Yeah. So he's like, basically because I'm being honest with myself. So that's what I do.
And he knows what his intentions are. But I think that the majority of people would say that you don't ask somebody to do something again for true photojournalism. But as a general consumer, how much do you care? Yeah. And that's my question, because I think all day long I could stand in a supermarket line and say to the woman next to me, do you think the journalist should just capture reality? And she would be like, yes, as she turns around and picks up Us Magazine and buys it. So it's putting your money where your mouth is a big deal, right? Because photojournalists, you don't get a giant check with a bunch of zeros at the end of the day.
Right.
To make your work sing, you really have to do something to stand out.
Right.
And there's always that constant pressure to push yourself farther, to get an image that hasn't been seen before, to bring the drama of a moment into something. Because drama is still, you have to have subscribers, still you have to have viewers. So there's a lot of pressure there to be able to do that, but keep as much of your own spin, your own feel of how it should look out of it.
Well, and I love the quote by Santiago Leon. He's Vice President and Director of Photography for the Associated Press. He said, inherent in the value of any journalism is its trustworthiness. We all check the sources of our information and make corresponding judgments of who or what we believe. That's how I think society is we've become jaded. We almost expect to be lied to nowadays, and so we don't even really feel the need for it to really be truthful. I think there's a slippery slope that we're like, as long as it titillates me and it sparkles and shines and it hits me where I want to be hit, I don't really care if it's truthful or not. Sell me a good story over tell me the truth. Would you agree?
Me personally, absolutely not. No way. But I'm somebody I think that shows a lot of discretion in what I view and what I take to be the truth, and I work very hard to find journalism that I feel like is truthful, whereas your everyday consumer really isn't. But I think that there has been a huge acknowledgement towards that slide of the general public, even by WPPP, who chair people on their jury have come out, chairwoman, chairman, and said, maybe we need to re-examine the rules.
Right.
Maybe our idea of what's real and what reality is changing as a general population.
Well, and you, coming from being a newscaster and all, you've seen all different permutations of how, news has been manipulated.
Right.
Surely you've never had a bias in a story. You've always been right down the middle, right?
Well, there was this story about these really cute kittens that I just said they were cute, and that's my own opinion, but they were, of course. And you see images and you see stuff taken out of context, video, even words, things that people say in interviews all the time, because you're charged with being brief and being compelling. Those are the two most important things. At the end of the day, your journalistic organization still has to cut a paycheck to a staff to pay people. And what do people view? What do people click on? What are people changing their channel to? You have to be compelling enough to garner those things.
And notice it didn't say, and truthful.
Well, a lot of journalism now is not even so much even about
report
truth.
First,
it's about
correct later, yeah.
Right, or source. As long as you can source information, it doesn't matter if it's the truth or not. As long as you can say, so-and-so said this, you can go back later and say, hey, so-and-so said it. We didn't say it. We didn't say it's the truth. We didn't say it's fact.
I kind of like, how many of y'all have noticed how many pharmaceutical commercials are out there nowadays? And what do? They do all this stuff. Hey, look at all this pretty stuff that can change. And then they have the side effects thing that comes at the end about it may do this, may cause death, or, I'm not going to go there. I was about to say something. But that's kind of where we've gotten in society, is that we're almost like the pharmaceutical company. I'm going to come up with this great new product, and I'm going to sell as much as I can, as fast as I can for a couple years, but I'm also going to have a lawsuit fund that's going to cover when everything hits the fan, but that's okay because I've already made my money on the front end. I think sometimes with contests and these other things, people have gotten to the point where they're thinking, I just need to make my mark and make my name. And even if I get caught after the fact, I've still got that recognition. And I'll just get more recognition for being kind of a jerk over here, but I got my name out there.
That could be part of it. But one of the things pointed out, especially in the case with WPP, is the rules are that you submit your raw image with the one that you've processed. So they know the rules. There's never been an issue with the photographers not knowing the rules. It's about how those rules are interpreted and each person's individual feelings about how much is too much toning, how much is too much exposure, and what sliders can you use and what ones you don't, right?
Well, I agree. And we tend to have a debate where we tend to assume that the person on the other side is pure of heart. And we know that there's the whole spectrum. There are people that got caught up in this that really thought that they were doing and following the rules. Right. But we also know that there are people in there that were trying to push the edge of those rules as far as they could go.
Probably.
We'd like to think that everybody's got the sunshine and rainbows in their hearts. But there are people that are a little nefarious. But here's the thing. You're given a set of rules and saying, these are the rules that we're going to go by. And then you complain afterwards when you get caught for doing that. I'm not necessarily, WPP, there's a slippery slope there, but even when those rules have been in effect for years, here's an example of, this happened in 2009. This was the original photo, and this was the photo that was going to come third place in the sports arena until they realized they were able to tell that he had cloned out, there's a foot of this guy in here. But that's the original image. And this is the final image submitted. Even though he knew all the rules and stuff, and he admitted later, yeah, I cloned it out, I did all that, but he still kind of argues, but it still didn't really affect the spirit of the image. Well, here's the thing. If you submit something to a contest, you're submitting yourself to the rules. You don't get to say, well, those rules apply to everybody else but me. I get to say whether or not those rules really matter. And that's kind of where we've gotten in society.
And my thought on this, when you showed this to me, I thought that they were two completely different pictures.
Yeah.
I didn't even think that they were the same picture. I was like, oh, that's one person's picture and that's another person's picture
but they didn't,
of the same moment.
But here's the thing, he didn't get disqualified for toning.
Right, he didn't get disqualified for toning,
it's because that little
for
foot
cropping,
right there in the hand.
And that's the least of the change in that picture.
Right.
So, I don't know.
So then my question that I would love to put to the chat is, as you know, part of you are photojournalists and in this industry, but a large portion of you are general consumers of this product. Does it matter? Does it matter to you whether that foot was in or out of that picture? And like I see some people say it matters based on assignment. If it's assignment that's a little bit more editorial, then they're okay with it. If it's assignment that's less, then they're not. Okay, if it's something that's hard news, then those should be straight.
Sorry, Brad. Slippery slope. Slippery slope. Slippery slope. Sorry. That's from the chat room. Sorry.
That's okay.
We're two children over here. I'm sorry, Mia. You're the only professional
You're the adult
at this
in the room.
table. Sorry. Go ahead.
What do I have to deal with? You see what I have to work with?
So, did you finish?
How long will this awkward silence last?
Hey, well, I'll jump right in. Okay, so in 2013, this is when a lot of this angst and fervor over the manipulation came into play, because this was the winning photograph for 2013. And then people came out and said, whoa, manipulated. It's Photoshop is now the photojournalistic tool of choice. What's going on here? And let me show you. That was the original, supposedly.
No, okay, so go back to the original because she didn't have it. There you go.
No. This is the one that showed up untouched in other newspapers, and this was the one for WPP for the contest.
What they submitted.
And so you look at that's kind of, and you can't get this. You can't really see everything in there. Let's see if I can shrink this down a little bit. Okay. So here's before, and notice you've got some of the major things that are going on. Watch the face here, some of the shadows here, and then this stuff up here. This was what was submitted for WPP. This was the winning photo, but that was more closer to the raw photo. This is where they had them turn in the raw photos, and they decided, yes, there was manipulation going on, but it really didn't change that much, so they were not disqualified. But this started everybody going, well, what is the delineation? Because in some of these, there's a bruise on the head of the little person here that's gone. Everything changes, kind of the feel of it changes. And so it creates this whole debate because of the mood of that. And so, here's the thing. Photojournalists see other people's works, and they realize that what they've got to do is they've got to create kind of an iconic look. They've got to create this romantic view of what's going on. And so the retouching and retoning and doing these things to give it that more kind of, as one person said, kind of that more Renaissance painting feel, or it's got this romantic feel to it, is really kind of driving a lot of this stuff nowadays. And so if you wanna fight the others and be part of the contest, you really got to start doing these things. Back in the day, all I had to be concerned about as a photojournalist is going out there and reporting and getting those shots and doing those things. And nowadays, it's like, I've got to go out and find those shots, shoot it in a way that nobody's ever seen, capture it in a way that nobody's ever done, and show it in a way that nobody's ever seen before anybody else.
And it moves somebody to pick up the publication and put down the money.
Right.
And so there's just such this pressure of, you've got to do more, you've got to do more. Especially nowadays, think about how many media outlets have been bought by other media outlets, and there's this corporate pressure on top of everything else. You're no longer this unbiased journalist out there.
Well, and even the average person has their favorite news channel, because news channels
Have their
they're not unbiased. They lean one way or another, and if you're one type of person, you watch this one. If you're another type of person, you watch the other one. And they know who they're kind of pandering to and who's watching, so they lean that way on purpose. It's not fair. It's not fair and unbalanced.
I don't think anybody would argue that
What are
now.
people saying in the chat?
I don't know. I've been talking to you guys. That's Brad's job to monitor the chat.
Right.
So,
well, I try not to stare at the computer when the camera's on me. I'm just saying.
one of the things I did want to touch on, though, is we talked about what you do before an image or while you're taking an image versus post-processing. And so we talked about staging and how that's, a complete no-no, although Eugene Smith didn't feel that way. But then what about things like lighting, right? So somebody in the chat said flash is a no-no. And that's not true. Actually, it's accepted in for most press awards,
Yeah,
right?
and my first job, like during college, was for a newspaper. I went out on assignment, came back, turned in my pictures, and my editor looked at them. She's like, "Why did you not use flash on this?" I was like, "Well, I was outside." And she's like, "Well, you can still use fill flash to illuminate."
So
the skin
manipulation
tone,
of light is okay.
right?
But also-
and even lens choice, like we were talking about earlier, like. If you took a wide-angle lens and took a picture of this close-up,
My
Pete's
schnoz
face is
looked
not
awesome.
actually distorted, but in the picture it is.
So then it comes down to what seems like, at least, is
Right.
it comes down to intention, is what the photograph speaks of what the photographer's intentions were to show in the scene. And that's kind of scary if you think about it, because what you're seeing as a consumer is this person's intention for you to see.
Everything is filtered through somebody's vision, because even as the photographer, you go out and even if you're trying to be unbiased when you're taking pictures, somebody's editing those pictures down and choosing which ones are going to run. So you're not seeing the full story necessarily. But that's, again, intention. They're trying to pick the best pictures that do tell the story. What's the story? Who decides that?
Well, and then you get into the whole question about portraits. You stage the portraits.
Absolutely.
Is that reporting, or does it need a different category? People are saying that there really needs to be some different categorizations of stuff or different labeling. Like as soon as you do anything besides a couple minor tweaks, it needs to become almost like a photo illustration. There needs to be full disclosure, and I'm really a big proponent of that it's a full disclosure of what's going on, because what happens is if you don't say something, people assume and give it a veracity and a truthfulness to it that it might not necessarily warrant. But if you put at the bottom photo illustration, or you're very clear of this is my representation of it, then you're still maintaining that integrity and being truthful. Whereas sometimes you can, it's called the sin of omission. Oh, I didn't say anything, even though I know you're going to believe that this was not staged. If you say this is a recreation, then you take all doubt away. And I think we just need to become more transparent, and that's not where most people want to be nowadays. Appearance is more important than substance.
Well, and I think that line of transparency is sliding, because in the sense of, right, the one with the fence post, right? The image with the fence post. Does there need to be a caption underneath it that says, fence post removed from behind her head? Do you care? Do you really care? How much disclosure do you need?
That's a great question. That's what we argued about earlier. I care in the fact that they manipulated it and then didn't say anything about it. Now, I don't necessarily have to think they have to describe everything they did, but I think it would be some way to say that something on here that did not affect the context of it was changed, that there's disclosure that they did something to it.
That person was still shot. They're still lying on the ground. The fence post has nothing to do with that.
It actually makes a better composition without it, and I'm all about that. But
if I were to take one of my concert pictures, like I said, I have no problem cloning stuff out if it's distracting to the picture. But if then that picture runs with a story about the club catching on fire and there's no exit signs above the door in the picture where there were in real life, that changes things.
Wouldn't it be great if Joe McNally would weigh in on this?
Oh, wow.
Wouldn't you love to hear what he has to say about this?
Because he's got...
I was hoping that was a lead-in that he was...
Yeah, and there he is in the chat. No, I wish. Yeah. Hint, hint, no. I don't,
all right, I tell you what, let's take a quick break. Yeah. Maybe we can get somebody to call up Joe and say, hey, get in on this with us. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about this some more. Hopefully it's something y'all enjoying. We're having fun kind of wrestling around with this, and we'll be right back, guys.
Create your own space at squarespace.com.
I'm Cliff Mountner. I've always envisioned taking KelbyOne for an inside look at how I approach a real wedding. This is authentic. This is an actual client that has allowed me to capture their day and bring KelbyOne along. You're going to see how I approach every element of the day. We're talking about an overall view at my approach. I really hope you take a moment to check out my brand new classes, A Real Wedding, live and uncensored, only on KelbyOne.com.
All right, well, we're back. Hey, I'm just going to jump in real quick because we're battering around the whole idea of code of ethics and stuff like that. And there are actually some codes of ethics for journalists that are out there. And one of them is the National Press Photographers Association Code of Ethics. It's pretty similar to the Associated Press Code of Ethics, but here it is. Visual journalists and those who manage visual news productions are accountable for upholding the following standards in their daily work. They must be accurate and comprehensive in the representation of subjects, resist being manipulated by staged photo opportunities. Let me zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. Be complete and provide context when photographing or recording subjects. I think that's very interesting right there. Avoid stereotyping individuals and groups. Recognize and work to avoid presenting one's own bias in the work. Treat all subjects with respect and dignity. Give special consideration to the vulnerable subjects and compassion to victims of crime or tragedy. Intrude on private moments of grief only when the public has an overriding and justifiable need to see. That's a huge statement there that we have totally forget that.
Oh yeah, we've just blown right over that.
Everything's up for grabs now. While photographing subjects, do not intentionally contribute to, alter, or seek to alter or influence events. Editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic images, content, and context. That's big. Do not manipulate images or add or alter sound in any way that can mislead viewers or misrepresent subjects. Do not pay sources or subjects or reward them materially for information or participation. Do not accept gifts, favors, or compensation for those who might seek to influence coverage, and do not intentionally sabotage the efforts of other journalists.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
This isn't necessarily related to this, but it kind of is. Have you seen the movie Nightcrawler?
Yes.
I have not.
I mean,
He blew that away, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
Well, but that's not a real representation.
Right, but yeah.
Wait, no, the movies aren't real?
No. I mean, well, how many times have you seen somebody open and guts falling out on your news? I mean, there are some standards of what you see.
I lived in Thailand for 7 years, and
Okay.
there's a different
on
code
the
of ethics
on
there.
the general,
Yeah.
top news stations, you're not going to see the insides of somebody as somebody's working on them while they're coming out of a car crash, especially because there's no need.
Right.
But here again, that raises a good point. Ethics and standards change according to countries and boundaries and other things. What's acceptable in Europe is not acceptable here. What's acceptable in Thailand is not acceptable here. There's just this moving target.
Right. But when it comes to journalism, how broad should that target be? I mean, and I think that there's a large acceptance, especially when you go to commercial or you go to editorial. But when it comes to journalism, how broad should that? I mean, that target should be very focused on showing the reality of a story, right?
By editorial, you mean like opinion piece type stuff.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Well, okay, so I'm going to take a portrait. I'm going to take a photograph of this certain newsworthy individual.
Mm-hmm.
What can I or can't I do with that? And with that person, that photograph. What are my guidelines?
Are you talking about at an event or a portrait?
Let's say it's a newsworthy individual. Say the Dalai Lama's coming in. He's a power hitter,
Again,
you know.
event or portrait. Are they coming to you to, hey, take my picture, or are you going to cover an event that they're speaking at?
Okay.
Two different situations.
And that's good to know. But what we tend to think as a society is that those are the same thing. So we see, say, the Dalai Lama holding a golf club or something. He'd never hold it, unless, well, that's a whole other story.
But like,
I'm
say
going
you're
to
looking for the cover of
Caddyshack
Time magazine,
Right.
right? Which is largely thought of as, news and
News,
photojournalism, right? But you know that a lot of the portraits on Time are obviously completely staged and taken in the portrait style, especially when you're looking at a biography or something, a story, an editorial piece about an individual, and not necessarily a news story about them.
Right.
Well, and that's where you see, Joe McNally has done so many of those. Wonderful. Gregory Heisler, his name, whatever. I think of New York with Mayor Giuliani.
Oh, Giuliani, yeah.
And he talks about, he did amazing lighting to get that look and all that stuff. And it had this wonderful feel to it. And most people would think that's kind of a representation of news and it's real and all that. But there was a whole crafting of that image that we kind of both accept and forget it's there. And so we apply we just wash it all over with news. Mm-hmm. And that's where there needs to be some discussion and some separation out. I would say this even goes...
Well, that's what I think these awards are trying to do, is to delineate and to make that separation.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to rein it back in because there's been this heyday of look what we can do and look what we can get away with. And I think it's being pulled back in.
RC's trying to light me up in the chat. He says, how do the ethics and standards now change with these immediate services like Periscope and Meerkat on Twitter?
Well, listen, in the discussion about this, there's a whole question about, that's an entirely different discussion about the value of a still photograph versus now we want more.
Right.
We want a whole story, we want video, we want a whole scene of stuff. And one of the people chiming in says, basically the value of a single image has diminished. And that Facebook and all these things, Twitter, have more of an impact on society now than a single image. And I have an argument about that and where society's going, but that's for another discussion.
Well, I think that person is correct as far as the impact that it has on society as a whole. I think a single image still stands alone and can be one of the most compelling things that you see. Mm-hmm. It can bring a person to tears, certainly. But where do you spend your time? Right. Where do the majority of people spend their time? Not looking at a single image.
They're looking through a feed of images.
Right.
On Facebook or on Instagram. And
right.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of live video in these locations, I think, is a terrible idea.
Well, and here's the thing.
Why is that?
Oh, why? Go ahead.
Why?
Because
Elaborate.
as horrible as a gatekeeper as journalists may be and news organizations may be, there's still a separation between the general public and what's happening live. And I think that that's really important to have happen, because what happens is when you roll up on scenes of accidents, we've all seen photos that people have taken from iPhones on scenes of accidents. If that's now a live video feed, you could conceivably watch people die. You could conceivably watch somebody you know die on Twitter, and there's no regulation of that. So as against news organizations as people like to be very vocal about, there's still somebody toning it down and making sure that you don't see the stuff that's really needless, gratuitous
Right.
violence or graphic information.
But that's all we want these days. We want that. That's where society is. That's the stuff that gets the ratings.
Unfortunately.
So who's to say? I have no problem seeing a person die on there. Are you going to regulate that for me?
You're a terrible person.
Yes, I am.
No, and that's you know,
I'm
that's a
playing
judgment
devil's
call.
advocate here. That's the whole big question of who gets to say these things. Who gets to decide?
Well, now everybody does.
Yeah.
Now everybody gets to decide what you see
They
live
vote-
at any moment, at any time.
Well,
vote
in
with
fact,
their
you can watch
viewership and their dollar.
KelbyOne on Periscope all that you want. We do it every single day. Live feeds from our company.
Well, and here's the thing. What's funny is what has happened is we've created a society that it's all about me. I get to choose everything. Even when I submit to a contest, I really get to choose which rules apply to me, and then I get mad if I get bitten by those rules. Because wait a minute, I can do anything. I've got the ability, because I've gone to schools that don't have any grades. I've got all these things. I feel good about my self-esteem. I'm the center of the universe now, and that's where society kind of has gone. We used to have a sense of shame and social fabric that kept us in check in some degrees, but now we can do anything. And I want to see people die. I want to see all the gross stuff. I don't want anything filtered. That's what some people are going to say, because that's how hungry we've gotten. When you dine on shiny, when you learn to eat just candy instead of nutrition,
Right.
You want more and more sugar.
But just for an example, if anybody watching wants to take this video after we post it and just edit out the part before and after Pete saying, "I want to watch people die,"
Yeah. Yeah. No. Exactly.
That's a very
That's a
very
great.
good
That's a
illustration.
great point.
Let's bring that what you were saying back to the photographs and the images and the photographer, in the sense that there's always a pressure to stand out as a photographer and to make your name, and the only way that you can do that really is to have an image, or your style or images be associated with you. So I feel like you have a lot of times this pressure to put your fingerprint on something. And people may think that that doesn't apply to photojournalists, because in the purest sense, it shouldn't. But we all kind of fall down that slippery slope of wanting to be recognized for what we do best and wanting to be associated with our work, right? So part of that toning, part of the changes, part of the things that they do, the reason why they crop the way that they do, or the reason why they may choose that lens, is because it illustrates their signature.
it's their style. It's how they see the world in vibrant colors or slightly desaturated colors.
Well, so is it more important to get your style out there, be truthful?
I mean, I'm not. I don't necessarily consider myself a photojournalist, so I'm not the right person to answer that question.
Well, I'm not either. But here's the interesting thing is where we put our value and where we put our worth. We've all seen this, because I was a freelance photographer in a newspaper, and where it used to be you had a reporter that went out there, pad and paper, however they did, and reported the news, and then there was a photographer that took pictures of the event, and then if they wanted video, there was somebody recording that as well. Well, because of the way news and everything and the corporation of the media stuff and the lowering of newspapers as far as they're closing their doors or whatever, now a reporter has to report, photograph, and videotape all together. And so the push
Multimedia journalist is what they're called.
The push is to give as much as you can for as little as they want to spend. And so as a creative person, if I was a photographer, what I'd have to do is I'd have to make myself marketable. So I've got to stand out so that I don't get fired. so
Right.
that I don't get replaced by a guy with an Instagram account and an iPhone.
But I think what the key is that you still have to have integrity in the process. And that's the point that I think that the World Press Photo Organization, that the whole contest, they're trying to get out to people, right? So Michelle McNally is the chairwoman for it, and she's the director of photography and assistant managing editor at the New York Times. And I just want to read a quote from her. It says, World Press Photo needs to be more exact about its rules, and they know it. But the industry needs to be more exact, too, about what is and isn't acceptable. We have to do something, but I don't know what it is yet. Do we check every single picture's RAW file before it goes out? Is that even possible? We all have to take action because right now the situation is heartbreaking. And that's, really the way they feel about it when you have to disqualify so many photographers, feeling that these are good images that had the potential, but they just over-processed them. Because they're trying to achieve something. They're striving towards a perfection, towards a level that isn't real.
Right.
They're taking what's real in society and trying to push it into this hole of what's preferred.
When I think they're trying to make a movie of life.
Right,
Because
right,
we have romanticized and made every event be that perfect cinematic scene. And so we're expecting that even in our news now, because think about all the visual information we have had bombarded in us. We have so many images in our visual library bank that it's hard to get excited about new images nowadays. So it's a Herculean task. And so it's leading us to try to push the boundaries. And yeah, I don't know where it's going to go, but it's a tough thing. I love to manipulate my images. I teach classes on composition and teach you about the things you want to get out of your images, how to get rid of those things, how to give it more impact and stuff like that. The whole thing is it comes down to integrity and what your goal is, what the output is.
There's a place for that.
As soon as you say this is for journalism, all that stuff stops. It needs to be as truthful and as honest and unmanipulated as possible. I think it also goes over into, we've talked about this before. It's easy to talk about it in the journalism sense, but I think it carries over into all our stuff, how we present our portfolios. We've talked about, padding our portfolios with workshop imagery and things like at Photoshop World, which is awesome. The Westcott booth does this great lighting setup and has these wonderful photo opportunities. People come in and get these great pictures there, and the next thing you know, they're up on their website, in their portfolio, representing this is the kind of work I can do.
When they didn't set the lights, they're not directing the model most of the time.
But one of the reasons why they're doing that is this push to stand out and to show people how awesome you are and to be make sure you have the best website you can. And so we're really more about the flash than about the substance.
But if you have a Flash website these days, you're probably not doing it.
Hi-oh, Brad makes a joke.
So I think for all of us, even if we're not, a lot of people are like, well, I'm not a photojournalist, so I don't, it doesn't matter.
But you're still a consumer. You're still a consumer of information.
Right.
And apathy is not the way to go, people, right? I think that's the most disgusting characteristic is apathy, to just not care about it. At least have a voice, at least have an opinion, at least have a feeling about it so that you can weigh in and make the decisions for yourself. Because if we stop caring, then nobody's going to care. Who's going to care? Things are going to get sad.
I don't care.
I think we need a break.
Hey, Brad, why don't you send us a break? You usually have a nice quip for what we need for a break, so.
Oh, geez, I haven't even been thinking about it. Well, before we do, I want to mention the Peach Pit e-deal. You can get 40% off of a book if you go to peachpit.com.
Is that the most enthusiastic
KelbyOne.
plug you have ever heard in your life?
I was trying to find the name of the book and it wasn't there. So it's the design book from Robin Williams. Hey, look at that. So 40% off. Use the code
By the way, for
KelbyOne.
those who don't know, that's not the comedian. Robin Williams is phenomenal. This book is awesome. You need to check it out. If you're into design, check that out.
So there you go. Peachpit.com, KelbyOne, 40% off.
Use the coupon code KelbyOne.
Also, Friday.
We're doing something fun.
Yeah.
We're doing more live stuff. See, that's the great thing about live is you never know what's going to happen, right? So we have a live webcast at noon on Friday. Now that's Eastern time, where we are going to be talking about Photoshop World. If you have never been, or you know nothing about it, or maybe you've been a lot of times and you just like to talk about it and get excited, it's like a pep rally kind of for it, we're going to be talking about Photoshop World and why you should go and sharing tips.
This webcast will be hosted by Larry Becker, the MC of Photoshop World. Larry will give you an insider's view of the event and introduce you to a few instructors and preview some of their classes. Whether you have been to Photoshop World before or this is new to you, you'll want to check out this website this Friday at 12 p.m. Get all the details at KelbyOne.com PSW Preview. That's where you can find it. Yeah, it's going to be a great time. We're going to show you some stuff, get you excited about Photoshop World. And if you sign up before next week, you're going to get a $200 early bird discount, so it's worth it checking it out. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about a little bit more about this stuff and maybe get into a fist fight. So we'll see you back here in just a minute.
Ready? Anytime? We are the Photoshop guys, and we host Photoshop User TV.
Place where you can get up to the minute. Wow, why am I doing? All right, here we go.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Corey Barker.
And I'm Pete Collins.
And we are the Photoshop guys, and we host Photoshop User TV.
Now, Photoshop User TV is the place where you can get the latest tips, tricks, and industry news all about Photoshop.
And that's right, we're covering everything from design, 3D, compositing,
illustration, photography, and even a little Lightroom.
And even we have some of the best Photoshop instructors in the world on the show as a special guest to share their tips with you.
So if you want to find out more about Photoshop and have a good time hanging out with us, make sure you check us out at KelbyTV.com. Passable.
Yeah, that was okay, but...
Passable. Hey, and we're back, and we're just... RC standing over there, and we're having a discussion with in the break about the whole idea of that a lot of times the dividing line is that you cannot clone and heal, and they've actually taken it a notch further. That's almost become a given. That's why they have now the raw files. As soon as they would see something that's been cloned or healed, you're out. But the big discussion is how much toning can you do?
Right.
Because you could really, in essence, take and tone something so that it just disappears.
You can burn it down so much or dodge it away.
But then the question, and they refer back to what could you do in the darkroom? Well,
there's plenty of stuff you can do in the dark room.
Stuff you can do in the dark room.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I closed down that the one page that I wanted. I'll have to bring.
But
back
are those the standards? I mean, are those really the standards that we live up to today, where very few people are using a darkroom? Certainly, nobody that's shooting for a news outlet or sports outlet or any kind of wire services is working in a darkroom situation. So, I mean, how do you apply those standards to what we're looking at today? I think that's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, and like, I mean, we've shown this on the show before, but if you want to switch back to Pete, you know, these are the retouching notes for the darkroom. Like, you know, burn down this, brighten up that. You know, some of our iconic images that showed up at different places, how much they were actually toned. I mean, this is all toning; it's nothing else. Let me hold on. I'm zooming in so they can see. All right, so now I'm moving down. You know, Muhammad Ali. Look at these are all marks for what they're going to do in the darkroom. So I don't think that anybody would say that this is over the top, but you know, I don't know, how much is too much, I guess, is the question. Like, where do you draw the line of, well, you can only darken the corners this much? You know, like, is it changing the overall mood of the picture? Is it...
So the judges at the WPP competition were saying the photo, it's become so that the photo is not recognizable from the raw image to the processed one, that it's not recognizable. And then that's when they're like, absolutely, you know, it's just disqualified. Well,
and I mean, if we're going back to those examples, the one that Pete was mousing over, the original versus the one that was turned in, where, yeah, that, I would say if people are complaining about that, but they're not complaining about the hand wrap, and they're only complaining about it because a little bit of a foot was cloned out.
Well, it got disqualified. It was.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have gotten disqualified if the foot had still been in that picture. That's a completely different picture. I'm sorry. But it
Well,
is.
and that's a question. How much cloning? I mean, cropping and stuff like that. Because you can
And he could have done this
dramatically
in
alter.
camera if he had
Right.
switched to a different lens and zoomed in.
So
You know,
on the
like, so we're
Go ahead.
what's okay, what's not. That's it.
Well, on the New York Times blog, they actually featured a photographer who wanted to remain anonymous, who submitted his work and was disqualified. And one of the things that he says is the world is used to filters and manipulation for the sake of aesthetics. I think that's true. I think that's very true, and that's why I say the general public, will accept certain things. So how do we as visual communicators adapt? I believe that many of us adopted certain techniques not to change the truth of what we're attempting to articulate, but to make our images stand out from the crowd. And we talked about that
Right.
pressure to be different. As photojournalists or documentarians, we aim to highlight life and tell stories, but we all do it in our own way. Each of us is a product of our own experiences in life, and those experiences determine our motivation behind each click of the shutter. And the thing is, you're never going to get away from that. I mean, right? I mean, that's the truth of the matter. He's right in that sense. It's your experience that shapes the image that you take when you press the shutter and what you do before you press it. So how much of it can be completely objective?
Well, I think maybe I've been trying to think of a takeaway from all this. You know, it's kind of like it's a really interesting discussion, but I feel sort of like my dog sometimes.
It's like a hall of mirrors.
Yeah,
Can't find the way out.
And I think part of it is that first of all, we all need to become more literate in the way we communicate and we view images and knowing more about it. But also, I think just like if we read an article and we want to know the veracity of it, we need to investigate the writer and find out where they're coming from. I think sometimes we need to not just take an image at face value, but then do a little research on the person and what they're doing. And we may even find out we like the image even more once we learn the story and stuff like that.
That's true. The story can certainly shape it.
But I think
you keep sharing these things with me, and I keep trying to tell you, don't believe anything that comes from The Onion. It's not a reliable source.
Well, but the whole thing comes down to we don't need to be apathetic. Part of what is driving all this is a lot of people know that society as a whole will just accept whatever.
Right,
And won't
that's true.
challenge things and won't investigate things.
That's true.
We have relegated our rights and responsibilities and our privileges to let other people take care of it for us. And that's where we're getting into some of the slippery slopes. Yes, slippery slope, there you go. We need to take back some of our own responsibility and strive for integrity both with other people, but more importantly with ourselves. We've got to become those people that go, other people may do it this way, but I'm going to do this not to be pedantic and not to say I'm better than everybody else, but to not callous our hearts. I could get philosophical, but the more we shave and get into those gray areas, the more our heart gets used to it. I want to be a sensitive individual that, Brad, I thought you were laughing. I want to
He
be a
gave him the
person.
shivers. He was
I,
like,
I want to be a
"Oh, I won't go
person
there."
that people can trust and go, I'm going to get a square deal from Pete. And if I keep shaving things off little by little by little, in a few years' time, I'm not going to be a trustworthy person. I may have created one thing that everybody loved 5 years ago, but we're a culmination of our lives. And I want to be able to look back at the end of my life and people go, he was a good photographer, but he was a great person. And so many of us have flipped that over, and we've taken our personality, our character, our integrity, put it to the side for the sake of becoming great in something else. I've become a great photographer, even though I clobbered everybody to get there. And I think we need to start trying to come back and go, that's not where we need to chase things.
And I think that was said a little bit, by the chairman of the organization, chairwoman,
But not as eloquently as me.
Well, kind of more in the sense towards your image, right? And as you're talking very much about your individual as a person, and I think that there might be people who take offense and say, hey, I'm not a bad person because I manipulated my image. This is how I really thought that it should be seen or thought that it should be displayed. But one thing that I always went back to when I was a journalist is the idea that you are really a public servant, in the sense your job is to be able to show the public what's happening. And when you stop thinking it's about you, and it's about the idea of that public service of being their eyes, being their ears, being, being able to relay the information to them so that they can make their own conclusions. And we often lose sight of that. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems that ends up coming out of journalism today, is that we lose sight of that idea, because we do think it's about us and our work and standing out and our awards and that kind of thing, when it's really a service to the public.
Well, we see that as well think about wedding photography. It's no longer about the wedding. It's about my portfolio and the shots I can get of your wedding. I'm a hunter at your wedding, and you're the game. Instead of me serving you as I've come here to document your wedding and it be about you, it's now about look at what I can do. And that's, unfortunately...
Way to slander an entire genre of photography.
I'm saying that...
Every wedding photographer out there.
That's the trend of where we're going. We forget that everything we do is a relationship. Part of social media and everything else is actually distance us from everybody else, and it becomes about me. Once again, it becomes about me, and I get so focused on me creating that great new image, me winning this contest, me doing this, that I no longer am thinking about y'all. I'm no longer relating to y'all. It's about me.
Way to be so confessional.
I know. It's all about me. Hey, I tell you what, we're going to wrap this up, but I want to wrap it up on a little lighter note. Feel free to chime in, holler at us, send us.
Sorry, your mic stand, all I can see is Tinder for photographers.
Feel free to holler at us, send us emails, Twitter, all that stuff. And hey, while we're talking about it, where can people see more about you, Brad Moore?
BradTakesPictures.com. It'll redirect you to be more visuals. But
nice, you switched that up?
Yeah, BradTakesPictures.com.
And how about you?
I don't have a site.
Okay.
I'm Mia Mac on Twitter and on Facebook. You can find me, just type in Mia McCormick and I'm there. And I often am answering questions about gear, specifically video gear, anything to do with GoPros, that kind of thing. Sliders. We had a slider on Periscope today, so I'm good for that.
And you can find me on PeteCollins.com or over on the KelbyOne site. But this is, I love this. This was on Petapixel. But for you photographers out there, if you haven't seen this, I'll add the link in the show notes. But exposure is now legal tender for photographers. And it's a tongue-in-cheek article about how you can now pay for stuff with exposure, because the trend for most people will tell photographers that they can work for exposure. And so just a little fun note on the side, check that out. Now you can earn exposure.
There you go.
There you go. I thought that was kind of funny. But from the looks of y'all, you're like, yeah, that was awesome, Pete. Thanks. Woohoo. That was about a 3.5 on a scale of 10. I tried my best. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate that. We've got a couple new classes that are out on aerial drones by this woman right here. She took to the skies. Wait, I gotta get my radio voice. Mia McCormick took to the skies to bring you 2 classes on the new Inspire One by DJI.
It's not a boat, even though we have a picture of a boat there.
Because it was taken from the drone.
A quadcopter.
Yes.
Right.
She's going to teach you how to sail. I'm sailing.
So I did this class with John McQuiston here.
Wait a minute. I haven't finished reading. Class 1 covers setup and the basics, and Class 2 covers advanced flying and features. This class is awesome with an exclamation point. Okay, now you may go.
You've said it all. I'm done.
No. See, she just turns bitter on me. Mia, I appreciate you. Please tell us more.
Well, you know, what's funny is that on a previous episode of The Grid, we've talked about how I've crashed the Inspire One, and now I have 2 classes out to teach you how to fly it, you know? But
you learn from your mistakes and you pass it on.
I knew you were going there. But here's the thing. Like, you have to make mistakes to get used to it. You have to make mistakes you have to fail to rise again, right? So I learned a lot.
They can learn from your mistakes and hopefully not make their own.
Exactly. If you're into quadcopters or drones and you're maybe thinking about purchasing one, we go over like the calibration and setup, and we teach you a bunch of flying techniques. We go over some of the FAA rules, because those are things you kind of need to know before you take your drone up in the air.
Yeah, especially going to national parks or whatever. I remember going out to Valley of Fire, and the very first sign I saw is no drones allowed.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's serious.
There's a couple of ways you can get your drone taken down real easy.
Yep. Speaking of out west, Bill Fortney has a brand new class called Extraction and Close-Ups in Nelson Ghost Town. That's in Las Vegas, one of my favorite places to be, and Bill Fortney is one of my favorite guys. Bill's classes take place in Nelson, Nevada, a fantastic ghost town that is chock full of Americana. That's where it all went. This class covers Bill's gear for this type of project and his philosophical approach to the subject matter as he walks you through each photographic setup. Check out these and more new classes on the KelbyOne, on your KelbyOne dashboard.
You know what we didn't have this time? Giveaways.
Love? We do have giveaways.
Do we have giveaways?
We have giveaways.
Oh, you're just hiding them from me.
I am. Brad, why don't you tell us about the giveaways? What's going on?
No, we already talked about that.
Yep, we already talked about the Photoshop world. So giveaways.
What books we got?
We've got 2 books that you can choose from, one or the other. Let me see. Am I getting that right there? Okay. Your Camera Loves You. Oops, that's on this hand right here. It's tough to look at the camera and know which one. All right, Your Camera Loves You by Kara Plakanik. Learn to Love It Back, or Urban Exploration Photography by Todd Sipes. So you can choose one or the other. You're going to go into the KelbyOne.com/contest page, fill out all the information, and then put down there which one of those 2 books you would like, and one lucky winner is going to get that book mailed to them at KelbyOne.com/contest.
Yeah.
And that's all.
That's it.
Well,
That's it, folks.
Hopefully we'll see you Friday at noon for the live
Yeah.
Photoshop World webcast. Come check that out. Other than that, peace out.
Thanks for watching.
Bye, guys. Peace out. Awesome.